requested. Did actually, I think that was today, right, Nikki? Yeah, that was today, October 15th. Any other correspondence the committee received during the past week? Looking at the cameras, I see no. All right. So also just for point of reference amongst the committee, there are a couple of members I do not see dialed in yet. I do not see Mrs. Harrison from the school, who I believe will be joining us. And in addition to that, I know Ms. Douglas mentioned she would be in person. I'm not sure if she's joined yet in person or not. All right. Welcome, Carrie. All right, moving into reports. We have quite a healthy agenda this evening for Budget Committee department review summaries. I do see Deputy Chief Nickel on, as well as Chief Sergeant on as well. So welcome to you. We're going to get into your budgets here momentarily, but first, let me turn it over to Town Administrator Brown.
Okay. Troy, what's the password to get on?
John right on here. Is he listening?
Brunel?
If you do Litchfield NH2,
Wi-Fi password, Mr. Brunel.
Wi-Fi password, select Litchfield NH and hit the click through.
you just have to, yeah, I think you just click.
Yeah.
There's no password. We did receive the draft minutes from last week, yesterday. I don't know if others had a chance to review them. I have
Oh,
sent
I'm
some
sorry.
edits to Michelle.
Yes, I'm sorry. I skipped right over the review and acceptance of minutes. Thank you, Ms. Forty. So with that, and before we get started in the town business, we did receive both the October 1st as well as October 8th minutes. I know there were some modifications submitted to Michelle, who has acknowledged receipt of those amendments. Is the committee prepared to approve both October 1st and October 8th? You want to separate them out? What works?
I don't know that I've seen the edits, so I don't know.
Okay. What about for October 1st? Those still in review too?
Yes.
Okay. So let me defer both minutes to do next week, and we can go from there.
Sorry. Unless anybody else has reviewed them, I can't even get into it right now, so I can't even tell you if I've seen them. Let's see.
Okay. Well, that's all right. We can certainly defer them to next meeting. That's all right.
All right.
All right. So now we can get into town business. Mr. Brown.
Okay. Yeah, just quickly, just mention to the board that since the last time we met, we've been working with department heads and coming up with some adjustments to the proposed budget. Right now, we have a running total, which some of these you've seen previously at your past meetings. But the reduction sheet that I have here, a summary of $110,000 of reductions. So those, of course, we've had some reductions, we've had some increases too. But right now, the tax cap, I think it was right around, we were exceeding the tax cap right around $27,306. So that's putting all of our health insurance and dental insurance, and we did receive our property liability and workers' comp today. So those both did increase, but really not a significant amount. Property liability was $2,700, I'm rounding, and workers' comp was $6,331. So those have been added, and as we stand here today, we have $27,000 over the tax cap. And as I've told the committee, on next Monday night, I'll be presenting information to the board for consideration of trying to take a look at our current budget and trying to do our best projections of where we think we're going to end up at the end of the year, and actually taking some of the things that are proposed to be purchased in 2021 and expediting those to be purchased in 2020. And by doing that, I believe we're going to definitely put together a proposed budget that will be under the tax cap. The only variable right now, the thing that one issue that we'll have to decide on will be revenues, and the big number would be the room and meals tax. So that will be something that we'll have to, be working with NHMA and just really the state and trying to get some good direction of what we could anticipate. If that revenue source, I think it's unrealistic to believe that revenue would remain the same. I obviously due to the pandemic, I think it will be a decrease. But I think that's for discussion for another day.
When is the deadline for like the credits and abatements? Because that might have an impact also.
So, the deadline for filing abatements?
Abatements for property taxes,
Mhm.
after they get their second issue tax bill, they can start filing, and March 1st is the deadline.
So then we should know all of them for this year then?
Yeah, they have up to, as Karen said, up to March 1st. Once they can't apply for the abatement until they get their second tax bill.
That's just to me seems interesting because we have to use that number in our tax rate setting, but we don't really want to know what it's going to be then. So,
No, we never do know what it's going to be.
because is this the first year of the changes that were approved?
It
The
is,
increased amounts.
yes.
So there's going to be an impact. We just don't know the magnitude of that impact.
So I think what you're saying is that you believe that we're going to receive a lot of requests for abatements. People
Well,
are going to
the value-
dispute their value of their home.
Well, not just that, but the veterans credit has increased, so that's going to have an offset.
That's already
Okay.
in that number that I've discussed. That's already been calculated.
Okay.
And that's a good point. That did increase just over $100,000.
And what did we project on that's about what we had anticipated, isn't it? And okay. Okay. Thank you.
So with that, we have a long night, and I think at this point in time, the first item is the health department. And I would ask Deputy Nicole to go ahead and present that, or Chief Freitzel. I'm not sure who's presenting.
So which account number? Just so I can speed to it. 4111.
So that would be 4411, yes.
Thank you. I'm trying to
You're
use
welcome.
I'm just trying to be fancy and use my computer. It's just easier to find the tab if I know where I'm going.
Just so you're all aware, we're both here.
Yeah.
Online.
Great.
Okay, we all set?
Sounds good. We're good. Are you guys good?
Yep, we're good. Okay, so health department, salary for the health officer is level funded at $1,500. The water analysis is level funded at $180, no changes. Dues and subscriptions is $140, level funded, no changes. Seminars and conventions was $210, and then it went up to, it was a decrease to $140. And that's it. Any questions about the health department?
So I believe Chairman Cutter was having an issue. He wasn't able to unmute himself. So apologies about that, but thank you. Does the committee have any questions on the health department? All right. So I think we can move to the next one in our list here.
I think that's going to be the ambulance. That should be
Yes.
4215.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and present this, and Doug and Chief Freitzel can back up any technical questions as they work directly with the Hudson Ambulance. But ambulance is pretty much, as you see, we have two lines. So the first one is really the contracted service that we have directly with the town of Hudson to provide the ambulance service. And the second line is for bad debt. So bad debt, we carry $10,000. This amount goes to cover any bills which are not paid by transports that are initiated here in Litchfield. So we're obligated to make sure if they're not paid through an insurance company or just privately paid, then the town is obligated to pay that. It's a reduced rate. We will pay the town of Hudson for those unpaid fees. And then we have a system in place where we'll reach out and do a couple billings after, if that is not, if we don't receive payment, then we do send it to an outside agency, a collection agency that will pursue collection. And eventually there will be, credit reporting and all those things that are involved when the collection agency is involved. So at this point in time, we're not looking at the contract. The contract is based on, there's a formula based on their ambulance budget and a percentage of our calls. So, it's hard number to project. We've seen it to be pretty stable over the past couple of years. So that's why we're level funding this year. Almost level funding.
It's about as level funded as we've been in a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah.
I was actually pleasantly surprised.
Any questions?
No, the only comment I have is it seems like we're finally leveling off on the unpaid balance, the unpaid ambulance. So perhaps Hudson's finally gotten the billing system in order.
The billing system has been consistent. They've really been on top of it. And internally here, when we've got a process in place now for the unpaid, collectibles, where Karen will work with those bills, work with the auditors, work with our outside collection agency. And so we manage that bad debt. There is usually on an annual basis, the selectmen will take a look and they do write off the bad debt that we just no longer can collect. But it's still, it's never released from the collection agency. So that's always there. You never know.
No, I just
10 years from now, you might get a payment for something, but yeah.
no, but I remember us being hit with
Oh,
bills
it
that were
was-
2 years old. So it's glad to see that it's actually starting to level off.
They had,
So we're getting them quicker too.
That's
which is
awesome.
better. At least they're not a year or two behind. They're 6 to 9 months.
That's more manageable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Easier to project in your budget.
any other questions?
No questions from my side, but hopefully you can hear me now.
Okay. Oh, it's Andrew.
Thumbs up, thank you.
All right. So fire administration, 4220.
Okay, so the first one is the fire chief salary, and that's basically an increase of $621. That's a merit increase only. Fire department wages, again, is a merit increase of $807. Call firefighter wages is what was approved for $89,360. It was a decrease of $4,275. So it comes down to $85,085. Fire department training wages, that was also a decrease of $3,294. The fire inspector, again, that was a merit increase of $119. Fire department overtime, again, that was an increase just for a merit adjustment of $1,359. Fire department training overtime, again, it was another merit adjustment for increase of $1,799. Uniform allowance.
Hey, Deputy Chief, I'm sorry, a question on the overtime. Yeah, this is Andrew Cutter. So a question on the overtime line 140, if I may, and 149, right? So merit adjustments, how was that applied to the overtime line? I can understand salary and wages, but can you just elaborate a little bit about the overtime line specifically?
I'm not sure where your question is, Andrew. How
On
we arrived at
140
that?
specifically in 149, right? You know, so overtime to me, and we've had this conversation on the town side quite a bit, right? The overtime to me is kind of out of touch across the entire budget. This is just one small component of it. You know, so don't feel like I'm picking specifically on the fire department for overtime, but when I see increases for overtime, merit increases, you know, that to me seems like if we're doing a merit adjustment for overtime, and overtime is supposed to be above and beyond an extra, I'm just curious as to why there's a merit adjustment associated to overtime lines to begin with.
So I can clarify that. So the rate changed because of the merit increase on the hourly rate, that affects the hour time and a half rate. So that's what that increase is. So it's not a change in hours. It's a change in the employee rate of pay based on the merit increase that was awarded through the town's evaluation program.
Understood, but overtime is not a guarantee, correct?
It's not a guarantee, but when the staff has to work late for a call or come in for emergencies that require additional personnel, that's where your overtime costs are coming from.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I do have a quick question in regards to overtime, if I can.
Please.
Will they hear me? Okay. In terms of overtime, is there anything done in terms of if there is overtime? I know in other parts of the town, if you have to stay later for something, then at that point you change your hours on a different day to avoid overtime. Could you elaborate a little bit in terms of why you would end up in situations of overtime?
Sure. So this is Chief Reitzel, just so everybody's clear. So we have 2 full-time employees that work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. If at 3:45 they go on an emergency that lasts an hour, they get an hour overtime. If it's 4 hours, then obviously it's 4 hours overtime. If there are emergencies that require them to come back outside of their normal hours, they get overtime. As far as giving them time off, at other, adjusting the schedule during the week, we have nobody else to plug into that 8 to 4 shift. So if we were to compensate for the overtime on a Monday, on Friday, we would basically not have any full-time coverage Friday afternoon. So I don't have a means, or we don't have a means to fill that on a or allow somebody to be off because we don't need to backfill their position. There's only
You couldn't divide it up so that way you would have individual cover, one person covering while the other person took time off to offset their overtime, so you always had one person in the office?
Yeah, we can't run with one person. It's not safe. Two is actually, not ideal, but it's what the town has had for the better part of 30 or so years. But one person is not an option.
So Chief, what happens, I'm just thinking about that answer, right? So what happens if you get a call, say at 6 or 7 o'clock on a Friday evening?
So that call is responded to by the on-call staff. And if it's a significant incident, then the full-time staff would come back. One of them being obviously the deputy who would come back for an incident management role. But primarily, neither full-timer respond to every call after hours. They only respond when necessary. And one lives in town, one lives out of town, so one doesn't typically come back unless it is something major or significant or multiple calls.
Thank you.
Good to move on.
Any
Any
other
other question?
I think we're good to move on. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, fire department uniform allowance, that was level funded at 400. The health and dental and short-term and long-term insurance, I don't know if Troy wants to speak to that.
Say that, is this the propane?
No, the health insurance.
Health insurance.
Oh, the health
No,
insurance?
the insurance is
All
correct.
right.
You wanna answer that one?
That it went up 6.4%.
Troy, have you plugged the numbers in for the health insurance and dental and so forth?
Yeah, Karen
Yeah,
will
there was an
respond.
increase in the health insurance of $3,506. It went up 6.4%, and there was no increase in dental. Dental is a zero increase this year. Or next year.
Yeah, okay, so if anybody doesn't have any questions, I'm going to move on. So the fire department computer software contract, it was no increase, level funded at 2277. The fire department dispatch service contract is again level funded at 8,400. Fire department pre-employment screening, level funded at 11,450. The fire department instructor services is an increase of $112 through one of the people that we hire for providing those services. Fire department electricity, it actually is a reduction of $3,000. Fire department heating, again, a reduction of $3,000. Water is level funded at 4620. Fire station repairs and maintenance, level funded at 13,425. Fire department dues and subscriptions, there's an increase of $224. Fire department general supplies, there's an increase of $150. Fire department community relations is level funded at $750. Fire department office supplies, level funded at $1,000. Fire department postage, level funded at $100. And fire department equipment repair and maintenance, level funded at $61,450. The fire department vehicle fuel, there's actually a decrease in price of $275. And that's based on what Troy gives us when he purchases the price per gallon for fuel. Fire department custodial maintenance supplies, level funded at $1,000. Vehicle repairs and maintenance, level funded at $30,000. Fire department books and periodicals was an increase of $450. Uniforms and accessories, level funded at $4,200. Fire department protective gear, there's an increase of $525 that generally goes up 3% every year. Fire department medical supplies, level funded at $5,000. Fire department provisions, level funded at $500. Fire department equipment purchases, level funded at $23,250. Fire department equipment leases level funded at $1,200. And fire department mileage and tolls, decrease of $50. Fire department seminars and conventions, level funded at $12,105. And that's it, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. I do have a question, then I'll open it up to the committee as well. Just, kind of a high-level question, right? I know the Board of Selectmen instructed all department heads to go through kind of a zero-based budgeting approach. Just curious what learnings you've had as a result of that approach this year.
I think probably one of, we've always kind of looked at it from that approach, Mr. Cutter. But I think being our first budget in the new building, we've come to look at some of the costs, and heating is a perfect example. We didn't really have a number to go on. Previous years, we were paying for 2 buildings during construction. And actually reaching out to Energy North and looking at what our actual usage was over a 12 to 13 month time frame kind of allowed us to drop that as much as we did. Electricity, we had a little better. I think we were able to drop a little bit, but the usage is the usage. And then looking at another example I use is mileage and tolls. That's really a placeholder. We rarely use it, but we have had on occasion had a need for somebody to transport a piece of equipment or something in a vehicle that, a type of vehicle that we don't have, i.e. a pickup truck or something prior to us replacing the utility. Or we may have somebody that, can't get from to here to take a department vehicle to a class and has to go right from work. So, we dropped that down. Just really $50 is merely a placeholder. We didn't expend anything last year out of that line. I don't know that we will this year, but it's really a placeholder. But we need a placeholder should we incur that type of expense. So, I think we always have, we kind of always, at least during my time, have looked at it. The deputy and I have worked the budget collectively for the last several years. And this was, his first year at really taking the lead on it. So it prompted a lot of questions as to why and how and so forth. So that was certainly a good exercise. Kind of made us look at it from 2 different perspectives, if you will. So.
Thank you. Let me turn it over to the committee. Any questions?
Chairman Cutter, I had a question. This is John David's son. In looking at the seminars and convention line, it's about $12,000. Same from last year, and seeing that we have a spend of only about 40% against that for this year. Understandably, because things are virtual or conferences and conventions may have been canceled. And assuming we're anticipating that for at least probably the first half of 2021, is that have you all had conversations around what that line item might look like for next year, anticipating that it might not be the full 12,000?
So we basically had no outside training, meaning all fire academy and emergency medical training certification programs were put on hold back in late March, early April, and only in the last 3 to 5 weeks have started back up through remote and small group type trainings. But I foresee that continuing, and I foresee on both the firefighter and EMT side, those programs getting back to a more normal schedule and availability in next year. We actually have 2 members that are currently in, one's in advanced EMT class and one's in an EMT class. Those programs, like I said, just started up probably 4 weeks ago. And then we have, one member that just finished their firefighter 2 because they were caught in that, COVID time where they actually had 3/4 of the class and then the class got put on hold. So in this particular line, I don't see it going back to the way it was unless we obviously get into much more serious times and you know, as we were back in March, then I would expect a decrease or using that next year. But I can tell you that we just actually did interviews for some new on-call firefighters. And out of the 4, only 1 has any type of training. So we would be sending, assuming we were to hire all 4, we would be sending at least 3 of the 4 to training next year. And out of this line.
Okay. Thank you. And I assume a majority of the sessions that your firefighters or EMTs are doing, they probably are looking to try to hold a lot of those face-to-face as safely as they can. A lot of those things are probably things they can't do virtually or do as effectively virtually.
As much as we like to, yeah, there's just, unfortunately, you know, way too many skills that can't be done virtually or by a computer. They have to be done physically, in person.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members?
A question, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
On the health insurance line for the 58289, how many employees does that cover?
2. Oh, sorry.
Take that.
3.
Yep, for the health insurance line for $58,289, or under department proposed 54,783. How many employees receive health insurance as part of that line?
3.
3?
Yes.
Okay. A follow-up question on that. Why is it based on the role that they have? Is why that line item seems to be a little bit higher than other departments, or is it just that I took a look at other departments and they kind of split the cost somehow?
It probably depends on the plans that they have. And with HIPAA, you really can't say what they have, but you know,
So the fire department may have a different health plan than another department within the town. Is that what I'm understanding?
or dependents.
Family
Okay.
versus.
No, so just for clarification, in the town, we have the same plan for all of our employees. There's, and including in the union. And the cost share is 80-20 and the part-timers are 50-50. So that's standard throughout the organization. We have 2 plans. One is, you know, it's a higher deductible and different type of network, and the other one is more restrictive. So the employee can choose which way, you know, which one they want to select to be in. I think what's driving this price here is just enrollment. So it's the same cost, but it's, you know, some people may be a 2-person plan, some might be a family, some might opt out, and so all those variables look different throughout the different departments, but the cost and the plan's consistent throughout the agency.
And what is the current?
Okay, and then
opt-out
just-
amount?
I'm sorry, just one follow-up question. You said there's 3 people that are covered. We have 2 full-time employees. What is the third role that is covered by the health insurance on that line?
What did you say that again?
So I heard that there were 3 people that were covered under that line item, but there are 2 full-time firefighters. What is the third job role that is covered as far as the third
That's our fire chief,
person?
our fire
Okay,
chief.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Not currently.
I think one follow-up that I have Chief and Deputy Chief, and thank you again for presenting your budget tonight. We greatly appreciate you joining us to walk us through this as you do every year. One of the things that I noticed when going through this budget specifically, and Chief, you kind of alluded to it when you were talking about the heating, is, we have $6,000 budgeted for heating, right? But throughout this budget, there's several examples of, what I would call nice round numbers in the budget. 6,000 for heating. There's 1,000 for supplies. There, I'm just scrolling, right? There's 30,000 for vehicle repairs and maintenance. I'm just really questioning, how good of a budget are some of these numbers? Right? When I see nice round numbers like that, it just makes me think that, this is a guess.
So some of those lines you mentioned, Mr. Cutter, there's no way to, a vehicle maintenance line. It is, quite honestly, it is a best estimate. Based on the past 2 to 3 years of data, what we know from inspections of potential issues coming up, and so forth. We could go out and we'll just use tires as an example. We could get a price on tires right now to retread 2 of the trucks next year, and by the time we do it in June, that price has changed. So there is a little bit of rounding, averaging, if you will, because there's a lot of things that we just can't put an exact dollar number on, and to be that finite for something that may not take place for 9 months out.
Yeah, thank you for that detail. I appreciate that. I guess in spirit of that answer, my view is this is also partly why we have expendable trust funds, right? Now, I don't recall off the top of my head what we have for specifically allocated to the fire department, but to make up some of these differences is the whole reason why we have some of these expendable trust funds. Is that not accurate?
Correct. That fund we've only used when we've had major issues with apparatus, though, that exceed the budget. And as a matter of fact, I believe it was last year, we had to rebuild a pump on one of the trucks, and had that been as catastrophic as it potentially could have been, we would have had to reach into that expendable trust fund. But fortunately, we caught it ahead of time. It wasn't as major as it was, and we actually absorbed the entire cost within the budget for that expense. So, there's foreseeable, and then there's unforeseeable expense.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anything else for the chief or deputy chief tonight?
Mr. Chairman,
I know we have fire hydrants next, right? But, go ahead, please.
just a quick question. This may be for Mr. Brown, because I think he alluded to this at the beginning this evening. We talked about, spending on some equipment or items, coming out of this year's budget. And so, specifically in fire, when I look at, things like equipment purchases, like, the thermal imaging camera and things like that, and seeing kind of where we are year to date, in some of those line items, Mr. Brown or to the fire chief, I'm assuming those are things that you're looking at that could be expenses that come out of our 2021 budget based on what we have left in this year's budget.
Yeah.
So at the highest level, yes. I would just say this has been obviously been a very odd year. We have a lot of things that we had to hold off on, some of them being equipment purchases, some of them being building and vehicle maintenance, just because many of our providers would only come out if it was truly an emergency. And 2, we didn't want, we locked the building down for our personnel safety. So we delayed a number of our routine maintenance and annual testing and so forth. So those haven't hit the weekly, haven't hit the budget yet. Some have been done. The bills just haven't been processed. Some are to be done, and some are scheduled. But yes, some of what we're looking at more along the training lines, because we did not conduct departmental training for the better part of 3 months. So we have some unexpended funds in that salary line. We've had a good year from the maintenance standpoint. We haven't had any major maintenance issues. We do have a couple of things that were identified as part of our routine state inspections last month that are going to be taken care of. But yeah, we have, because it's been kind of an odd year, we do have some funding that we could pre-purchase items that are in this budget and even better reduce this budget, provided the board agrees to that and approves that in the coming week.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are we good to move on to hydrant?
Yep, that was my question, so we're good.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's shift gears into hydrants, please. This is 4220.
We'll
Okay.
defer to Mr. Brown.
Yeah, lucky me. So,
$500 million bag of fun, right?
and just always want to remind folks, way before my time, I know many of you probably recall that there was a warrant article that was passed that the citizens voted to take on hydrants as part of its operating budget. They were individually funded, I think, through the rate users. So
Yes.
if you were a Pinnachuck customer, then you paid for your water consumption, meter, and there was a hydrant rental fee built into your monthly bill. Anyhow,
Built in, it was right there.
it was there.
Right there in your face.
Full print. So we've taken that over, and that's been several years now. We have one hydrant from the city of Manchester, and we pay $160 on a quarterly basis for that hydrant. We have a fixed fee, so we pretty much know what that cost will be. Pinnachuck Water, we have 255 hydrants that we're budgeting for. I think this represents an increase of 7 new ones in 2020-21, and some new will appear on hydrants will be in service, I'm told, the first of the year. So 7 new hydrants, but also in addition, there is the PUC anticipation that there will be a rate increase will be received, approved, and we will be paying for that rate increase. So that's really why you have $44,436 increase, 7 new hydrants, and a rate increase.
Telling you, we should approach Manchester and offer to have them buy our hydrants.
Unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that. It's way above my head, but
I'm just saying,
The-
2,000 per hydrant,
this-
680 per hydrant.
this
From our
town is,
perspective, sell it.
it's almost like a cable franchise, area where Pinnachuck, they have this area, and they would have to, for anyone to take over that water system would involve a lot of legal work and involvement of the PUC.
Well, this one disgusts me every year, so.
So I think, from my side, and this is just a comment, I know, this is really outside of Town Administrator Brown, your hands, right? But I think part of the sensitivity here for hydrants is, if I go back to 2014, this was $300,000, right? In 2017, it went up to 320. In 2018, when we had a lot of the new hydrants come online as a result of PFOA, it went up to 450. Now we're at 508, right? This is a trend that is very expensive to maintain within the operating budget. You know that as well as anyone else. And the rate increases and the dollar amount within this budget, although very important, most certainly, it's unsustainable. So what can we do as a town differently to offset some of these costs? I know in listening to some of the recent select board meetings, I know this is top of mind for Selectman LaSalle's. etc. But that doesn't help us now, and that likely won't help us for the next couple of years. All right, so what's more of a short-term plan? I think the town, the board, we need to talk about this and we need to figure this out. All right, as a resident, and I have no idea why our water is so expensive. I know many residents in town feel the same way. I've heard stories that because we're supplying water from Litchfield to Pennachuck and Nashua and then coming back to Litchfield in terms of being cleansed or whatever they put in the chemicals in the water, purifying the water, etc. Because of that route, it's very expensive here. I don't know if that's true or not, but we need to figure out a way to reduce this and to do better by the people in town. Any comments?
Agreed.
I just don't think there's much we
Additional.
can do. Like, our hands are tied. Like, unless we're going to buy out the system, in which case you're talking a bond and lots of legal action. I think we're stuck until this is a board of selectmen legislature kind of thing. And I don't know if there's anything we as a budget committee can do.
Absolutely agree. And I'm not willing, devil's advocate here, right? And certainly I'll preach my own choir. As I mentioned, several months ago, I'm not getting into policy discussion. It's not the budget committee's purview, but
Right.
the number of 508,000 is our purview.
Well,
Right? This is stemming from a big policy issue that needs to be addressed. End of story. That's my point.
I agree with you. And I think that we have, when you see Pennachuck can do a hydrant for under 700 and Manchester can do 700 and Pennachuck's $2,000. I think we need to be making a better case to the PUC, like why the discrepancy? But I don't think that's us. So.
Agree. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just a comment, just to add on to your particular piece. I think this goes back to the theme that I've had ongoing since the beginning is, at that point, then the town growth needs to take this into consideration. If there are new developments to get popped in, there needs to be some consideration around what sort of budget impact that's going to look like as far as popping these hydrants. Because, sooner or later, the tax revenue from a new development is not going to offset this impact on the schools and everything else. So.
All right, let's move into code enforcement, 4241.
All right. Salary line increase based on performance evaluation in July. Temporary inspector, obviously, again, being a little bit of an odd year that it's been, the inspector didn't really use too much time, and when he did, it was a day here, a day there. So we didn't have a need to utilize a temporary or part-time inspector. So we did cut that back. However, if you were to take a week off or 2 weeks off, we would need to backfill that position just in order to keep up with the demands of the office and inspections and so forth. So we did leave about 2 weeks of vacation time in next year's budget. Overtime is level funded. Health insurance was a decrease. Dental was a decrease. Printing, about $100 increase. Forms and tags and inspection permission slips and so forth that he utilizes. We have gone predominantly electronic. However, permits and approval stickers and decals still need to be printed. And we've seen those price increases. Dues and subscriptions. The big change there is just about a year ago now, or I believe it'll be a year in December, we went to an online program for inspections and database record management. So that is the cost of maintaining that program each year. And I can tell you that the data and the information that we've been able to gather and the convenience of this program to the builders, the contractors, and the residents that are pulling permits. Basically, permits prior to had to be applied for and everything taken care of at town hall in person. Now, basically, you can pull a building permit or an electrical permit online, pay for it online, and never even have to step foot in town hall. And I'm sure you can all appreciate that when COVID hit us, because this had been up and running, it just made it work even smoother. So that is what that is for, and that's probably the biggest change in the inspection code enforcement department in a long time, is going to an online platform. For the most part, everything else is level funded with the exception of seminars and conventions. The requirements that the board placed in on the inspector's position when it was advertised 2 years ago, these costs cover all the certifications that the building inspector, who's also a deputy health officer, who's also the zoning administrator, has to classes he has to attend and certifications that they have to attain based on the requirements that the town put on the position. So that, with that, we still have a decrease, obviously predominantly due to health and dental insurance. There's a decrease of $13,685. I'm sorry, it's $13,053. Wrong column.
No, that's
Any questions on code enforcement?
stupid call.
Questions from the committee?
So this might be a Mr. Brown question, but I'm thinking with this cost of the online permitting, the $4,000 a year, would we consider offsetting some of that with increasing the cost of getting a permit if it's directly related to the convenience of doing it electronically? Does that make sense if it's going to be an increased cost in the budget?
Yeah, in fact, the Board of Selectmen, we introduced a proposed fee schedule for to the Board of Selectmen at our last meeting, and Monday night they'll be looking at it again. Based on Monday night's discussion, I'm hopeful that we will go to public hearing to have further discussion about increasing our building permit fees throughout the entire fee schedule. And we're hopeful that if it's approved, that we could be looking at somewhere between $20,000 to $25,000 in additional new revenues that the building department would generate in 2021. So that, that would go put a big dent in that $27,000 that's over the tax cap right now.
So pull a permit now is what you're saying?
Does that answer your question?
That's my
It's a good
interpretation of this
question. And so we're looking at that and hopeful that we'll, at least get to go to public hearing and get some feedback from residents.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I missed the last Board of Selectmen meeting, so that's my bad. Thank you.
It was late at night.
So if I could, Mr. Chair, if I could
Please
add
go
to
ahead,
that.
Chief.
So that was one of the things, and I'm glad you brought it up, Nikki. That was one of the things that when the inspector started with us, one of the first tasks they were charged with was to look at our current permitting schedule, fee schedule, and how we compared to other towns. Inspector Dion did that and pretty much had the proposal ready to go. COVID hit and we're now coming back to it. But I can tell you that we're nowhere near anywhere near many of our surrounding communities or communities of similar size. And certainly it should be not only cover the records management program, but in reality, it almost should be a self-funding department or very close to. So that is one of the things that is at the top of the list to get through. And as Troy mentioned, that it's in process now for permit fee increases, which would help offset a pretty decent amount of this budget.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on code?
Just a question in terms of the need and the increase since 2019 on overtime.
Please.
I'm sorry, what was the question again? I just jumped out.
Yeah, just the increase from 2019, which was $317. Now we're up to $16.92 as far as overtime for code enforcement. I just question in terms of, overtime necessary for that. If a builder needs to have something inspected, then they should have to fit into the regular business hours and not cost taxpayers additional money.
So the inspector was only with us for 3 months, not even 3 months out of 2019. He was hired in mid to late September, if memory serves me. So that amount really only reflects a 2 to 3 month at best time frame. As much as inspections are done within normal business hours, there are extenuating circumstances that preclude that. There's also emergency callouts for issues that may arise that compromise structural integrity of a building. For example, a vehicle drives into a building. The building inspector would be called out to assess the structural stability and work with us on the fire side to ensure safety of, emergency personnel as well as property owner and guests on the property. And there's also some need for after hours, I guess I would call it investigative duties when dealing with zoning or other building complaints that may not necessarily crop up between 8 and 4 Monday through Friday, only occur in the evenings or on weekends. That would require the inspector to go out and take the necessary action, be it merely investigate or assess or address an issue, as I had said, an emergency type issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move into emergency management, 4290, please.
All right, make this one real easy. When COVID hit back in March, as a town, as your emergency management director, we were faced with the challenge of trying to protect our employees and the town and procure masks, gowns, goggles, stuff like that to, again, protect staff and employees. But we really had nobody really had any line in their budget to do that. We had, $500 in the emergency management budget for equipment. But I can tell you that, as a town, we've spent well over $500 as a result of this pandemic. So $1,000 more, $1,500 for emergency equipment isn't a whole lot. But I just felt compelled we had to do something and at least have some funds available should we continue this and lose any type of state and federal funding, or we face something else down the road that, we have to take fairly quick action to secure equipment, personal protective equipment and other type stuff to do what is in the best interest of the community.
I have a request then.
I'm
sorry.
Please go ahead.
My request with this line item then would to be separated out so that the $1,000 does not get lost. My concern is that if it's especially earmarked for COVID and unplanned emergencies specifically related to the pandemic, that once that's over, we'll forget that that 1,000 is there, and then it easily gets rolled into the general fund. But if it's a separate line item, it's easier to track as a special item and zero it out in the future, should it remain. So I would ask, just as we did with your stipend for the managing of the fire station, that since this is specifically related to a very specific item, that it have a separate line item in the breakout under 740, please.
Okay?
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman,
One other comment yes, please, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is, I guess, more of a question for Town Administrator Brown. I know when we were going through general government buildings, I believe it was, there was a COVID line item for $2,500 that then was removed from the budget because the board and the town felt that was covered through other sources. Why is this not rolled in as a part of that?
I think what the emergency management director was trying to accomplish here was the direct known need, which is COVID-19 that we are currently in, and we know will continue into 2021. And I think also having funds available going forward, the $500, getting ourselves into other unknown emergency situations, I don't think $500 is a sufficient amount. So I think that between the emergency management director, myself, increasing this line to $1,500 is a sensible thing to do, actually going forward. I know that contradicts what you're trying to do here, Carrie, but we've got a community of 8,500 people, and we have $500 for supplies for all of our staff and residents. I mean, when we've hit this COVID-19, we're also, providing masks and hand sanitizers here for right here in the, the lobby area for our customers and boards and committee members. So I don't know what 2022 has. I don't know what 2023 has, but I think $1,500 is a reasonable amount for an unknown.
No. I'm not and please don't take it that I'm disputing the dollar amount or the necessity of the PPE and the supplies that are being referenced here. I'm specifically talking about how it's funded, right? And so I understood that the town is also having a $2,500 line that's being funded through this current year's funds or through other sources, specifically also for PPE. So why is this not part of that same ask? And together with the town in procuring and securing this essential equipment, that's the ask.
Yeah. I mean, the chief and I can go back and take a look at that, but like I said, I think going forward, I think $1,500 is a more realistic number for this department.
So I guess then that begs the question is it even related to COVID then? If we feel that in an emergency situation, you need more supplies, then I would remove reference to COVID and just say this, we've evaluated our budget and we feel we need more supplies in this instance. I mean, it's emergency management, but if it's directly tied to COVID and we don't feel that we'll need that once the pandemic is, God, please, soon is over, then we could remove it. But if it is just if it is an evaluation that your needs have changed overall, then I'd remove reference to COVID and just explain that we were woefully underfunded, and given what we now know, we need more money. It's just what is the accurate representation of this line item? I guess would be my question.
Yeah, I was not clear when I originally, so when COVID hit, we realized we didn't have anywhere near the funds we would need. This was the only line that we really could fall back on to start to secure PPE for the COVID pandemic. So in retrospect and looking forward and to not repeat history, I felt it best, and it's my recommendation, to put additional funding in this line for a similar type situation, not necessarily COVID. We don't know when or what the next major thing could be, but $500 isn't gonna help it. So this isn't just a 1 year or a 2 year, once COVID's gone, this should go away. What I'm saying is the town needs to plan and have some emergency funding, if you will, available when something of major concern is upon us, and we are, needing to make emergency purchases and so forth in order to, I hate to say beat the next guy to the supply, but beat the next guy to the supply. If we have to wait for any type of approvals or another budget cycle, we're going to be, on the back order list. So this wasn't meant specifically just for COVID. This was a lesson we learned when COVID hit and when the pandemic started, that we weren't ready, we weren't prepared. And this is going to help. It's not going to solve all the problems by any stretch, but I can't sit here and tell you that adding $10,000 is the right number. But I can tell you $500 wouldn't and still won't get us hardly anything in a critical time of need.
Okay, I have another suggestion. And this is what, I'm sorry?
Fair point.
Expendable trust fund.
That's right. You knew exactly where I was going with that. Because I keep hearing unexpected major issue, which we're not going to have every year. So my fear is then that we're going to end up with this big fund eventually, because it'll start at 1,500. It'll be 2,500 in 3 years. It'll be, so again, make a fund for it. We're not going to get a COVID every year. Please God. Hopefully it's, but if we build up a fund that's available when you need it and replenish it as necessary, then we don't end up with a fund that, like the one we built last time, where when it doesn't get spent, it gets rolled into the general fund and hopefully offsets taxes, but could also be used for other purposes. But if we have a specific intent for this, build an emergency fund through an expendable trust fund. That's what I'm going to advocate for.
We agree on something, Carrie. It's a great day.
Enjoy the silence of that.
Ms. Douglas as well. Use the information from this event to fund the trust fund properly the first time. Otherwise, if it goes another 20 years, we keep feeding $1,500 into this year after year after year for 20 years. That's not a good investment.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then as we all know, it's a bottom line budget, so if it's not used, it's washed into other areas of the budget, which I think is what this committee is trying to avoid. So in my view, there's a couple of good options here, and Ms. Douglas, thank you for your input, right? One is certainly in the short term, we should remove COVID and other from the notes and just call it unplanned emergency supplies. A better suggestion would be to pull it all together. Let's create one town emergency supplies fund, which I'm sure you will get full voter support for. Okay. Anything else on emergency management? Mr. Sun, did you have a question?
Yeah, my question, and it may be better suited when we talk about revenues later this evening, really stemmed around reimbursement of things that we talked about around COVID. So I can hold that question until we talk about revenues. It might be better suited then.
All right, sounds good. Any other questions before shifting gears into police? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Deputy Chief and Chief. We appreciate you joining once again and spending about an hour or so walking through your various budgets. We appreciate their being fairly level funded, so we thank you for your efforts again, and we'll talk soon. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye. Thank you.
Right.
And with that, we'll shift gears into Police Administration 4210. I know we have Chief Sergeant on the line as well. I'll turn it over to Town Administrator Brown first, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Cutter. But yeah, at this time, we'll just have Chief Sergeant go ahead and give you a quick overview of the budget and ask you answer any questions you have. The Chief?
Good evening, Mr. Brown. Good evening, Chairman Cutter. Good evening, respected Budget Committee members. First and foremost, I want to tip my hat to the fire department. What a great job they do. What a great service they provide for our community. So I'm just, I just stand by them 100%. With that being said, I'm really happy about the budget. My first year as your chief to come before you and present my first budget. So 4210, Police Administration. The PD salary, you'll see an increase of $9,791. That reflects the contracts that were negotiated by the town with the chief of police, myself, and Captain Scotty. Both of us will receive a 2% raise January 1st. Moving to 111 for the PD officers, you'll see a reduction of $19,735. This reduction includes that 2020 was a 53-week year, so we have 1 week left. We also have no officers that are receiving a degree stipend. We're currently hiring for a new police officer, and that position that is being filled is a corporal position. We do not have any certified officers that would reach that level. So if we do hire a certified officer, the salary will be less than what is budgeted for. So there'd be a cost savings there. Moving forward to 120 PD wages administrative assistant, you see a small increase of $250, and that's reflective of a longevity stipend for the personnel policy. 121 PD prosecutor, you'll see $77,906, and that's for Attorney Coates' salary for the year. That will be a increase from line 325, contract prosecutor, which is $76,000. So that includes a small merit-based raise for him.
Oh, okay.
PD wages, special officers, that reflects the 2 permanent part-time officers for their SRO duties, and both working 32 hours a week. You'll see a small increase of $3,000. PD wages and overtime, we're essentially level funded here. We were not able to make another reduction to the overtime line, given the fact that we're been short officers, and we were not able to put together a schedule that would help reduce that. I know last year you were pleased with a significant reduction in overtime. This year we're looking to level fund that, and hopefully in the future we can look at reducing that when we are full staff, when we don't have an officer on military deployment, when we don't have an officer vacancy. 141 PD wages, captain overtime. You'll see a reduction in $3,000. Captain Scotty is salary, so he does not receive overtime. So at this point, there is no captain overtime. The PD overtime, 144. We're reducing this completely down to $1. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for advising to leave it at $1. What we recognize here is that Attorney Brad Coates is doing an exceptional job with handling our criminal cases. We're not having to send officers in to work and go to court and then not testify and get a 3-hour minimum overtime cost. He's very thorough. He's able to plead these cases out. The officers are doing a fantastic job with their cases. So we felt, and I feel very confident that we can move forward with reducing this down to $1, and that we don't need to fund an overtime line for court overtime. So that's compliments to our prosecutor, Brad Coates, and I would also give compliments to our police officers for doing great casework, doing what they need to do, and we're able to resolve these issues out of court. 149, PD overtime and training. You're going to see a significant increase. Essentially, this increase is related to, this is the first year that we've had an officer on the SWAT team, the Southern Hampshire Operations Unit, full-time. And he trained 16 hours a month. The former chief we did not have an officer on that unit, and the chief at that time was able to utilize those monies to cover our training for officers. So with that said, given that Officer Underwood is an active member of the unit, it's essentially an $8,000 increase. Those monies cover his training, which allows us to still cover our mandatory training. Our mandatory training includes pistol qualifications. Our mandatory training includes use of force training. This year, we're scheduled for our CPR recertification. We also always train in our high liability. These areas include domestic violence training, legal review, low light shooting, rifle training, active shooter response training, and taser recertification. The governor has issued an executive order, and by 2024, the 8 hours of mandatory in-service training has now been increased to 24 hours. So this will allow us, if we budget this additional money, where we are and how we do our training, we will be prepared to fund and not have to increase that training line because we're prepared. So this $8,000 increase covers our SWAT training while also moving forward to cover us for the increase in mandatory training. PD witness fees, line 150, we've reduced that by $100. We haven't spent it. So as we were doing our bottom line budgeting, I said, we don't need to fund that anymore. So there's a small reduction. Under 191 PD uniform allowance, you'll see a reduction of $800. The contracts that were negotiated with myself and Captain Scotty did not include a cleaning fee. So you will see a $400 for each officer. So it's a reduction of $800. Community detail, I'm not increasing it. I will say that we typically tend to overspend that line item. I did not feel that we should increase it this year. Your health insurance, your PD dental insurance, long-term disability, life insurance, I think Mr. Brown has covered that for us, and we're all aware of those increases. The PD telephone and data, line 341, IT Director John Brunell has accepted that $2,760 under his budget. So while there is an increase there, it's a decrease in our budget. PD software and support, line 342. There's a small increase of $749. Level funding on the Child Advocacy Center, 349, 355 PD pre-employment screening, and 550 PD printing. We made some small deductions under PD dues, 560. I reduced the line by $105. I didn't see any benefit for the National Association of Chiefs of Police. So that's normally a $60 cost. We reduced that to $0. And the New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Secretary Association, that's normally a $50 cost. We're not taking advantage of that. We're not participating in that. So we reduced that down to $0. 610 are PD general supplies, small reduction of $270. 613 PD community relations supplies, level funding. PD office supplies, you'll see a reduction in $400. This was based off of our, bottom line budget scenario that the town administrator tasked us with, and we recognized that we could come in at under $400. PD equipment, maintenance, repair, 630. You'll see a reduction in $1,300. The Photocopier annual maintenance and supplies, which was $200 a quarter. That's covered by our lease agreement, so there's a nice reduction there. 660, PD vehicle repairs and maintenance. You'll see a small increase. This covers our consumables, which is our car wash, our windshield wipers, our oil changes, our inspections and whatnot. Just doing an outfit for the year, there's a small increase. PD books and periodicals, you'll see a $950 reduction. The captain and I sat down and recognized that a lot of our officers are accessing the criminal and motor vehicle code on their cell phones or, through the internet. So we don't need to provide every officer with hard copy of the criminal code and the motor vehicle code. So we felt it was important to have one in the chief's office, the captain's office, the sergeant's office, the squad room, and the prosecutor's office. So not purchasing those periodicals, that was a savings in $950. The 680 PD uniforms and accessories, you'll see a small increase. That's relative to the contracts that were negotiated with myself and Captain Scotty. We have a small increase in our uniforms. PD ammunition and supplies purchase, that remains the same. We believe that's a good, accurate number to cover us for our firearms qualifications, our TASER certification, and whatnot. 740, PD grant purchase. What I really want to address with the board at this time is how diligent and how much time Captain Scotty has spent to research grants that are available for us. And we've been the recipient of $12,000 of materials due to his applications for grants. And these are items that this year, next year, you would have seen in the budget. But Captain Scotty did his research. He was able to recognize that there were monies that were available to us and that could save the taxpayer. And so I really want to give him a lot of credit at this point and let you know that his hard work, his research is able to save us money. And I'll also let you know that under this PD equipment purchase line, you'll see that we are looking for $13,400 for radios to replace our existing radios. Captain Scotty and I have worked and located a emergency management performance grant, and we were awarded approximately $4,700 worth of money that we could purchase almost two radios without having to charge the taxpayers. So I'm really proud of that. We're going to prepare a memo for the Board of Selectmen, and hopefully at their next meeting, they'll accept those monies, and you'll see another reduction from our budget, and you'll be able to cut more out of the tax cap. So my hat's off to Captain Scotty, and I'm proud to really be going in that direction and take advantage of these grants. 760, your PD cruiser purchase. Many of you were probably aware that the Board of Selectmen authorized me to utilize funds this year to replace the vehicles that we deem necessary. So next year, there will be no increase it would be a 2-vehicle year. We've gone on a system of two frontline cruisers one year, one frontline the next. What we're trying to do, and Selectman Leary's tasked me with this, and I'm working very hard at it to make sure that we can get down to hopefully trying to just purchase one vehicle a year. So next year you'll just see a $1 increase, and I'm thankful for the Board of Selectmen who authorized us to take care of the vehicles that need replacement now. Seminars and conventions, line 811. The increase here is that I have plans to have every single police officer, from myself down to part-time officers, to attend a de-escalation training. This is an 8-hour training. The state has suggested 2 hours. I believe that 8 hours of this training is appropriate. So that increase is essentially for the cost of 17 officers to attend de-escalation training. And that's all I have for you on police administration.
Okay, thank you, Chief, and certainly, hats off and a special thank you to Captain Scotty, and to echo your sentiments about all his work on the grants and researching on the behalf of the taxpayers. I'd like to personally thank him as well, so please offer that to him on my behalf as well as the committee's behalf. Any
Thank you, Mr.
questions
Chairman.
for the Chief?
Thanks for all your work.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question. Looking at line 325, the PD prosecutor contracted services, that's a big decrease of $76,000. Can you explain what the contracted services are and why we don't anticipate needing them for 21?
So line 325 moved to line 121. Which
Okay.
is the PD prosecutor. So actually you will see an increase
Okay,
there.
I see it. Yep. Got it. Never mind.
And no,
I just had a question about the Child Advocacy Center. In looking at this current year, those funds haven't been expended. Was that related to COVID, or was it not needed?
absolutely.
Okay.
No, and those funds are absolutely needed. I mean, these are children's who are those horrific things, and this is a great way for them to receive justice. So COVID did slow things down, but we absolutely have to stay on board with the CAC.
Is there a reason why we didn't fund the full request? I'm just looking, since I'm actually using my computer this time, I can actually click on the link and see the request, and I see that it's slightly more. And given COVID and the fact that a lot of children have probably found themselves in situations that are needing more assistance, would it be, prudent to consider funding the full request?
So I don't have,
I think that's just an overlook.
if you don't mind, what was the full request, Gary? I apologize.
The one here, this is dated July 27th, so of 2020, because usually they lag a couple years, but this one's actually updated for $2,750 for the request for the 2021 fiscal year. Not big for us, but it probably would make a difference for them. They list the number of children that have actually been serviced, but not the number, not the names of kids in the town that have been serviced. And if we're going to partner with them, and it just seems.
Yeah.
I would
so
advocate
it looks like
looking
they
for
came
it.
back and asked for an extra 10% because of the extraordinary surge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Chief Sergeant, I would just ask that you take a look at that. And, I'm not one to advocate increasing a budget, but here I would.
No, thank you, Ms. Douglas, and I think I would support 100% funding that extra 10%, and I think given the grant where we're going to get to save other monies, we won't feel it on the tax cap. So I would definitely 100% ask for the budget committee support to increase that by the 10%. Thank you.
See, Troy, I advocated
That's
an increase.
good.
Write that down on the calendar somewhere.
It's a new day. Carry it out in line with the budget.
I think what happened there is I uploaded that request letter, Chief, and it possible when you put the budget together, the last year's letter was there, and that's how it was overlooked. So thank you.
Okay.
Carrie, for catching that.
Well,
Yeah, good catch.
yeah.
See, it's because I have my computer this
Terry,
time.
yeah, great job. And I can't tell you, I've worked with Karen and Troy, and it's been a great experience. So I appreciate the teamwork that everyone's doing to put together a good, healthy budget. So it's been a really great process.
Okay, any other questions for Chief Sergeant?
I have one comment and one question. First of all, Chief Sergeant, by far, this was the best presentation so far. I appreciate the detail and the way that you presented it. Fantastic job. Love the extra effort that you folks are doing as far as grants that came up. I believe last week we had asked about that as well. So top notch, as the chairman said. Please pass on our thanks. And one question that I did had, you had mentioned something about the possibility of adding another officer. I know that in the past, we were at about $140,000 of overtime for officers on line 140. And then we passed that by the voters, and we've only seen about a 30K decrease in overtime. And I remember reading that particular Warren article that said, you know, in order to reduce the overtime, if we get another officer, we'll see a decrease. I guess just looking at, you know, what the cost of an additional officer would be, I would expect my ROI to be somewhere a little bit, you know, 50K or north of that as far as reducing overtime. Can you give a little information around, you know, what we can do to try to reduce that overtime number and make it, you know, where we actually have the right manpower necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. I'm happy to do that. And unfortunately, we're currently down 3 officers in the police department. We have 1 officer who's out on a medical disability. We have 1 officer who the entire year has been out on deployment. And we recently had a resignation and are looking to fill that position. So lacking those 3 bodies, it does not allow us to prepare a schedule where we can overlap, where we can have 2 to 4 officers working at a shift that doesn't require overtime. If an officer takes a vacation day, maybe we have to fill 2 hours as opposed to 8. So because of our being short-staffed at this point, I can't come back to you with a true assessment and say, hey, this will work. This schedule will work. So what I'm hoping is that once we get back up to full speed, when we are full staff, and if the town accepts another officer, even without that, I'm going to show you, the budget committee, the citizens, the board of selectmen, that I can save you money because of our staffing level. But right now, being short-staffed, I can't do it for you.
Yeah, just like your regular presentation. Fantastic, detailed answer. I know, I'm sure the voters that are watching this appreciate that.
I appreciate your
Yeah,
support,
absolutely. And, you know, I would just add, right, you know, this has been a hot topic of mine, I think, ever since I've joined the budget committee, right? So over several years, I've been drilling and hammering down on overtime and trying to figure out what that right balance is. And you're right. You know, I remember specifically, Mr. Taylor, going up in front of the voters and presenting at the budget hearing one year, and Ms. Douglas did, and Ms. Couture did as well, right, where we actually talked about and articulated the fact that with the right officers, we can reduce this due to unforeseen circumstances by the chief, yet we still don't have the return that we've ever anticipated. And I question, you know, in a perfect world, sure, we would see the return, but will we ever be in a perfect world? Will we ever see this line actually go down? Because there's always something seemingly that comes up. I don't know the answer to that question, but you, me, and I'm sure other committee members have the same comments where we'd love to see this come down, certainly by at least 50% at some point.
Yeah, Mr. Cutter, I would add, I think it's collectively we're all working together to, reduce the overtime cost. And I think I really appreciate your continued support. And I know I've had a lot of conversation with Carrie Douglas too, that, whatever little bit I can do, there's also a savings on the retirement side, to not cost the taxpayers those. So we're actively doing it. I believe, last year when we reduced the overtime by almost $30,000 and then savings on the retirement side, I think we're going to get there again. When I'm full staff, and yeah, no, I mean, I don't know, and we can't predict if it's going to be a perfect world, but if we do, I feel confident that I can come back with savings, hopefully to your liking, but if not, there will be savings, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to continue to work towards that. I'm going to hopefully come back next time to this budget committee, to our board of selectmen, and say, look, we had the staffing and we were able to cut money, and that's what we're going to do. And it's through, again, the collective working of the boards that it's all we're doing is we are working for our townspeople. So we're going to get there, sir.
Thank you. I certainly hope so too. All right. Any other questions for the chief on Police Administration 4210?
No, I get a chance to chime in and say thank you, Chief Sergeant, for all of your hard work on this. I'm not a huge fan of increases, and I'm not going to commit, but I will say it was a pleasant surprise to see relatively how low the increase is, considering some of the increases I've seen in the past. So thank you for taking the opportunity to actually build your budget up instead of starting from the top and and filtering down. So I really appreciate the philosophy you've brought to it. Thank you. And thank you to Sergeant Scotty. I'm sorry. Sergeant? Captain, I'm sorry. See, I don't interact with you guys often enough anymore. So thank you to Captain Scotty for all of his hard work. It's really appreciated, not just by us, but by the townspeople when they see their tax bill. So thank you for working with the town the way you guys have.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Douglas. It's our honor, and boy, am I blessed with what a great team. From the captain down to every sergeant, every police officer, who's really doing their part. And we have a good group of employees, and it's an honor. So we're gonna try if I'm open to the hard questions that will be in the future, so we can make sure that we have a good budget. But I feel really good, and I'm really proud in the first 10 months of serving as your chief of police to take advantage of grants that weren't taken that we didn't pursue before. So we're going to keep learning. We're going to keep educating ourselves, and if we can do better, we will. So I'm really proud, and again, thank you for recognizing Captain Scotty, because he's done a fantastic job.
Okay. In the interest of time, and knowing that we still have several budgets to get through this evening, with our end approaching here in just over an hour or so, I'd like to shift gears into Police Support Services 4210.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is very simple. Police support, you see a reduction on 110 for PD wages for dispatchers because of a reduction of, it was a 53-week year in 2020. Now we'll be back to 52. And so that's your significant savings. Everything else is level funded. Mr. Cutter, last year you made a reduction to the overtime line, and I feel very comfortable with that. I left it the same. So I would ask, given the state of COVID and lack of vacation requests, that we leave that where it is. We could visit that again. But other than that, I think you have essentially a level funded budget.
Okay, any questions on police support? That was pretty good. Thank you, Chief. Are you covering animal control as well, Chief Sergeant?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Why don't we shift gears into animal control then, 4414.
So you'll see a small reduction under line 128 because, again, I will highlight it was a 53-week year. So this year is a 52-week year. We also decided to reduce line 352 by $75 because essentially what we find is that the veterinarians who receive canine animals or what, that they don't charge the town. So you'll see a reduction of $163. So again, it's well funded with small reduction.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions on animal control 4414? Hearing none. All right. I think that covers it for Chief Sergeant. Is that correct?
Leaves.
That's
As
correct.
far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
All right, Chief. Well, thank you very much for joining. As always, we appreciate your hard work to you as well as to Captain Scotty and the entire force. We appreciate what you do day in and day out, and thank you very much again for putting such hard work and diligence into this year's budget. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Chairman Cutter, and all the other respected board members. I appreciate your support. I appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, without, I'm sorry?
I would just add, he's an absolute pleasure to work with.
Excellent.
He was the first one to
Okay,
come
excellent.
forward
Why don't we
with
move
cuts.
into Personnel Administration 4155? I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown.
I have his least favorite ones.
Okay, so personnel administration, as you can tell, this is a part of the budget where we capture all those payroll taxes and costs with New Hampshire State Retirement. The bottom line this year represents a $76,311 increase. This is really driven by the this year. You'll hear this, I'm sure, when you review the school budget. We've had an increase in the New Hampshire State Retirement. We have a Group 1, which are our non-public safety employees, and Group 2, which are your police and fire employees. So there's 3 different lines: employee, which is Group 1, your firefighters, and your police, and they all have a different percentage that that the town pays towards New Hampshire State Retirement. You can see that the non-public safety, it increased 11.17% to 14.6%. And our firefighters go from 30.09% to 32.99%. And the police are going to go from 28.43 to 33.88. All these rate increases take effect on July 1st, 2021. The other increases are a reflection of really the payroll adjustments that were given throughout the year, either through the union contract with step increases and promotions, or in our non-union employees with the performance reviews. And the last line there, workers' compensation insurance, we did receive that policy today, and it represents a $6,331 increase, which, again, I was actually pleasantly surprised with that. I consider that a small increase, what I've experienced in prior years.
Okay, any questions on Personnel Administration 4155?
I have a question, Mr. Brown. If an employee leaves prior to their vesting in the New Hampshire retirement system, does the town get any of those premiums back, or does that just get swallowed up by NHRS?
So yeah, if an employee leaves before they're vested, the New Hampshire retirement system will keep all the employer's contributions.
That's so nice of them.
Okay. And this is, to me, on the same trajectory as hydrants, right? If I go back a couple of years, it was $200,000 less than it is now. So it's really the same, in my mind, the same argument where, although there's not a whole lot this committee can do, there's nothing really that this committee can do. You know, we're kind of at the hands of those that set these rates. And again, the percentage increase year over year over year is really, in my mind, unsustainable. I'm not sure what we can do as a town to combat that, but you know, a $200,000 increase in this line just over a few short years is quite excessive. I don't know, Town Mr. Brown, if you have any comments. I guess not.
I have a comment on that, Mr. Cutter. So again, as I've spoken before, at that point, I mean, what this particular committee can do is, you know what, if our hands are tied as far as the retirement services, then you know what, it's going to have to just come in other line item budget cuts. You know, the voters just can't continue, you know, this type of trajectory as far as spending is concerned. And it's going to mean, okay, if you want to be able to have more items in the budget to be able to spend on, then when it comes time to negotiate contracts and things of that nature, you know what, if you get a very fruitful retirement, it means that you may have to take less as far as a salary is concerned, if you want to still be able to spend on the line items the way that you've historically been able to spend. That's really the only power that this committee has.
Brian had something he wanted to say.
Yeah, I just had a question.
Please.
Has the town ever done a study, how much money they could save if they stopped doing pensions and went to 401k plans?
No, we've never done a study, but as I understand it, to actually leave the system, we would be looking at, we would have to pay our, I don't know what the term is, but our share of the cost that we are obligated to, we'd have to buy out of the system, and it's in millions of dollars to actually get out of the system.
Is there any way of, you know, keeping whoever's in the system now, keeping them, but for future hires going to, is that a possibility?
There isn't, no. There would have been a time when this town voted to join the retirement system.
That was in 1979 when they introduced it. And back then, the state agreed to pay 33%. How much do they pay now? Goose egg? It was a nice bait and switch there, wasn't it? Here, we'll help you. Oh, wait, sorry.
Okay, anything else on personnel administration?
No, just
All right, I think that concludes our line-by-line budget review. Over the last 3 weeks, we've gone through a lot of budgets and certainly had good conversation and good debate on some of these line items. I think next up, though, we're going to go ahead and review revenue estimates. So I'll turn it back over to Town Administrator Brown.
Okay, if you click on the revenue estimate, what I've done is pretty much what we do at this point in time. Because we're at that point where we're setting our tax rate, and we've revised our revenue estimates for setting in the tax rate, and we pretty much roll those revenues over because those are our most current projections that we have. So, you know, anything that I can find that's a trend that's either going up or going down, I'll try to flag that. So I've done that, just highlighted things in yellow that in 2021, we're looking to do an adjustment. So the first increase you'll see is the motor vehicle permit fees. And we've been looking at the revenues received. and I've consulted with the town clerk, and we've agreed that we're going to increase the projections to 50,000 in 2021. The car revenue fees just continue to come in. They really do amaze me. They just, every year, they just continue to come in and increase each year. So it's pretty strong. We haven't seen a dip. We don't anticipate a dip whatsoever. Then you scroll down, you'll see.
Until we hit a recession, right? Once we hit a recession, then you stop buying new vehicles, and we've seen that historically going back several years.
Yeah, what you see is we always are pretty conservative with this number. So, it's quite possible that I don't know if we're going into a recession or not, but it's quite possible that in 2021 you could collect 1.95, 1.975 if so. Like I said, we like to be conservative because I can't make these revenues up, but pretty confident with our estimate here at 1.9.
Thank you.
Building permits is not flagged, but as we previously discussed, the selectmen will be looking at fees. I don't know what that process, the result will be. Obviously, the selectmen will need to see that there is a need to make adjustments, and then it's required to go to public hearing. And based on that input, there'll be a decision that will be made by the Board of Selectmen. But this is the line where we think that we could increase revenues by about $25,000. The next, everything's level funded. The next area is revenue from the state of New Hampshire. So the municipal aid shared revenues, $71,689. That was revenue that was that one extra check that we received. Mm-hmm. And we dedicated 100% of it towards our paving program. So that was a one-time check. And that's why you see that reduction of $71,689. This is one of the reasons I don't mind the one-time checks, but sometimes it just creates that yo-yo effect for our budgeting. The next one I highlighted in red, and this is the one that, the reason that you see it projected up $1,100 is that we're just budgeting what the revenue is for 2020. But obviously, this is the one that we're going to be monitoring, and we'll be coming back, talking to the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee about what we believe this number should be.
When does the state provide any input?
They'll provide us input when we set our tax rate, but that will be on 2020, setting our tax rate. And I've had discussions with them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like they're going to be able to provide that much guidance.
They can't say like we've seen a 10% reduction.
Yeah, so I'm really, I think that what's been really, really helpful through the pandemic is New Hampshire Municipal Association. They've been really upfront and have the information that they have provided us with all the Gopher grants and being out there, really, being in front of the governor and the governor's staff, telling them what our problems were, what our needs were, has been very, very effective. So I do foresee that, very hopeful that we'll receive some guidance on this number. The highway block grant, again, this is, driven by a gasoline tax. So I've reduced it to 190. We typically have seen this number up as high as our all-time high was 209,000. And this year I think it was 204. So projecting that to be a slight decrease down to 190. Whatever that ends up being, that's usually, it's a wash. So the block grant and the revenue, it ends up being a wash. And then I've highlighted down income from other departments just because we had some increases that we discussed when we reviewed the planning board and the zoning board. And I had made reference to the fact that even though because we're required to gross budget, that we've increased some of those lines for advertising costs, that we offset it with a revenue. So just showing you that, that we do that on the other side, the revenue side. Not all the advertising that planning board and ZBA do is, 100% offset with revenues. Planning board, for example, if they're looking to adopt or amend their subdivision regulations, for example, that's paid for 100% through the planning board and not through fees. And the last one was $54 for the meeting house, which is also the old town hall. And we pay for the electric, but we turn around and submit a bill to the Litchfield Historic Society and they reimburse us. So that leaves us a bottom line here of a $32,487 reduction in revenues over last year. Again, we're hopeful that we'll be able to increase revenues in the building permits by 25,000, and then we're just going to have to really work on getting us our best number that we could use for planning purposes for that room and meals tax state revenue.
I have a question. How is the payment in lieu of taxes from Hudson determined? Because I feel like my taxes have gone up that much in that time frame, and that's a much smaller number. So I'm kind of curious as to how we figure out what is an appropriate number for that.
I don't know if I can.
There's two properties that they have in Litchfield, and I just take their assessment and times it by a tax rate and send them a bill.
Okay. Like I said, I just feel like my taxes have gone up that much, and since it's not a much smaller value, like, it seems like they're getting considering what we pay for a lot of the Hudson services and how much my water stinks, because that's the water where that is for. That
I don't know. Is anyone else having a hard time hearing Ms. Douglas?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying that since that really is the water, and I mean, my taxes have gone up probably that $2,000 since 2017. And since that's a smaller value, I would have expected to see a greater increase in the payment in lieu of taxes from Hudson. So I was just curious as to how that got figured out and whether or not that number is actually appropriate and reflective of the value of that property or if they get to say what they're going to offer us.
So the two addresses that we bill to is 74 Cutler and Backlot 105 Woodhawk.
Yeah, those are the wells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll get back to you and take a look. I don't know if our assessor's actually getting involved in that.
Yeah, I
how
didn't
that's
even
done.
look at what the new assessment was and not knowing the tax rate.
Right.
Yeah.
I just feel like we pay a small fortune for our water, so that it should be worth more than that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on revenue?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Brown. It's brought up quite often around, well, you know what, if we had more businesses in town, that it would help as far as the tax side of things. Can you give me a little bit of insight in terms of, what an LKQ or a Litchfield storage actually does for a revenue impact for the town?
So you wouldn't see that here on the revenue side. That would be when people say we need more commercial development, they're looking for expanding your tax base. So if you pick up, 100,000 square foot warehouse and it's got a value of $10 million, then, the thought process is that's, going to generate a lot of tax revenue, and depending on the business may not have an impact on the demand of services. So I think that's what, people, when they say that we need more commercial, we increase our revenues. It's the actually property tax revenue, which you don't see on this schedule here.
But didn't LKQ also have an impact on registrations for autos? And because didn't they move a lot of their trucks over here?
If That would be an area if you had a business that came in and they had a large fleet of vehicles and they registered their vehicles here. Yeah, you would see an increase in the car vehicles. I can
Any
tell
other
you that
questions?
sometimes commercial development can add to have a demand on your police and fire and other services in the town, and so sometimes it causes a need to actually spend additional money in your departments.
Especially if they require a couple more fire hydrants.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question in regards to the revenue from federal government, or the federal disaster relief or FEMA reimbursements. Do we have any estimates on what those might look like as it pertains to the CARES Act or other sources of revenue there?
So the FEMA reimbursements that we'll receive, typically what happen is those funds are received, and depending on what the reimbursement is for, it may actually go directly into a line and credit that account. So in other words, if we were eligible to get reimbursed for 75% of a certain overtime expense, when we receive that money, we'll credit the overtime line to the appropriate department. So not always do you see any of the FEMA funds come in here. I don't anticipate that we will. Do you anticipate seeing any actual revenues coming in 2021?
I don't know.
Yeah. And the Federal Fish and Wildlife, I believe they own an old salmon hatchery here in town, and they pay a small portion of tax on that.
So just to follow up on that, sorry, we're not anticipating any revenue from CARES or federal funds to offset costs as it relates to COVID or PPE equipment or anything along those lines? Or are you saying we have received some of those and those have been placed in the appropriate line items to offset those costs?
So those funds will be received and accounted for in our 2020 budget.
Okay.
So even if they're received, say in January or February, they most likely will be costs incurred in 2020, and they'll be recorded in the 2020 budget when the auditors come in and reconcile everything.
Okay.
Now,
thank you.
I do anticipate, and I hope that federal funding will be made available in 2021. But at this point in time, nothing's official yet. The FEMA program, I think, expires the end of December of this year.
Yeah, but for some reason I thought it was October. Originally it was December 31st. Yeah.
So the Gopher, which is state and federal, all those programs for reimbursement will expire before the end of 2020.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before shifting gears into default budget? Seeing none, we'll shift into the default budget calculation, please.
Right. And the default budget is, it is subject to change. We pretty much have gone through it, but every time we get insurance rates and this change, we'll go in and make minor adjustments. But basically, the default budget is taking a look at the 2020 budget and minusing out any one-time expenses and any contractual type increases. So we're not able to, if, for example, health insurance, we consider a contractual expense. And so those rate increases are added to the increase column. Not knowing what, if we're sitting here right now, not knowing really what Electric rates might go up, gas, diesel fuel. We're obligated to just budget what was approved in 2020. So most of these increases you see are all driven primarily by insurance, wages, and payroll taxes. You see under general government buildings, a big increase there, 150,890, which again is that most likely all of it is, almost all of it is the lease purchase agreement for the radio communication equipment. The bottom line right now for our default is $7,346,362. And I did a quick comparison on our tax cap, which is really interesting for this year. The default budget, our default budget as it exists today would actually exceed the tax cap by 76,235. So it's going to be one of those years. We actually haven't had one of those years where the default budget is higher than the proposed. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have a proposed budget that's going to meet the tax cap. So it's going to be one of those years for the first time in a long time for the town that our default will be higher than the proposed budget.
And just regarding the tax cap specifically, the committee is looking at the tax cap on the operating budget, right? We're not obligated, I have to go back to the wording on that warrant article, but we're not obligated to also present a budget that's under the tax cap for default, correct?
You can't.
That's, it's the Board of Selectmen, it's their responsibility to prepare the recommended default budget. So that's a good question, Andrew. As far as when it gets down to whether you make a recommendation or not, I'd have to go back and take a look what we've done previously.
Well, we vote on whether or not you recommend the proposed budget. So if the proposed budget is less than the tax cap, we're not recommending a budget that exceeds it.
Right.
So we would be in compliance. And it's really, realistically, the default is set by law, right?
It's
so-
set by law and
So that would supersede.
it's not, I forgot. Yeah. It's not its own separate article. So it's just in that question when it says, hey, do you want to approve the proposed operating budget? And if you don't approve this, then you, by default, this will be the 2021 operating budget. So you're right. Budget committee will not act on the default budget.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but I'm also sensitive to how this has operated on the school in years past, right? And I'm sure Ms. Harrison can comment here too, right? Where there has been several years that I can recall where the default has been higher than the operating budget. And then there's claims out there that there's shadow games and false numbers and who creates these default budgets, et cetera. So what I'd like to do is be proactive about that, right? If there's a default budget that is higher than the operating budget, we need to be crystal clear as to why.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can work on I can work on some bullets and make sure that when we do when we get close to, voting time, that we make sure people understand why the default's higher than the proposed. A lot of that, as you all know, a lot of this is our proposed budget is being driven by the tax cap.
Okay. Any questions for Town Administrator Brown on the budget items covered tonight or the default budget?
I would like to
So
thank
just
you.
to clarify,
Go ahead.
sorry, Ms. Douglas, go ahead.
I was just thanking Town Administrator and the Board of Selectmen for presenting the default budget early in the schedule. It's always a pleasure to be able to review it in advance instead of at the last minute. So I appreciate you guys working together to get that in for our review. So thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
So my question is, I just wanted to clarify that the budget committee cannot touch anything in the default budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, the authority lies with the Board of Selectmen to set the default budget.
If you have questions, you can ask.
There has been times when the Budget Committee has questioned the calculation of the default, asked for justification, asked for clarification.
But ultimately, when we get to
Absolutely.
Campbell High School
Sure.
auditorium and people start to say, why isn't the default budget a zero tax increase, then they should talk to their Board of Selectmen, because we do not have any ability to make any edits to the default budget.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the town this evening?
No, that's all we have to offer. We seem to be right on schedule here, and as you know, we'll try to keep you well informed. Things are going to happen, we hope, Monday night that will actually reduce the budget some more, and we'll keep you informed so that when you come here Thursday night, we hope to have that information to you prior to you walking into this room Thursday night or attending virtually.
Excellent. Now, I know the next 2 weeks are your favorite 2 weeks of the year, right?
It is.
So my question, to you, Mr. Brown, is, at next week's select board meeting on Monday, is the idea as a part of that agenda to then present and essentially approve a budget that this budget committee can officially use as a starting point?
Yeah, I think that I think what you're going to find is that we're going to hopefully remove some of the proposed items that we discussed this evening. And some of those are going to be in the fire and maybe some in the police. We've gone through and done some stuff in the highway department. So we'll review those changes with you. And I think what you're going to be left with really is going to be the room and meals tax calculation. I'm not going to have that number for you Thursday night. And we also have the union contract, which we'll be sitting down with the union here very soon. So that will be a cost if we come to an agreement. And I'm hopeful that we will have a contract where there are IT services Monday night, because we talked about that previously, that when we reviewed the IT budget, that the contract expired at the end of this year, and that's up for renewal. So I think those are the warrant articles. We'll continue to work on warrant articles.
So I think for purposes of this committee, thank you very much, Troy and Karen. We appreciate all of your help and effort over the last several weeks putting together this budget, working with the various department heads, obviously the select board's instructions to challenge the budgets and present, kind of a zero-based budget approach to get to this point. Obviously, a lot of time and effort from a lot of people across the various departments has gone into this, and a special thank you to all who were involved.
Thank you very much.
With that, we're going to move into member input and new business as a part of our agenda. Any comments, questions from the committee?
The only thing I had was that I had asked about some feedback on the GMS staffing and why it was so significantly overspent. Obviously, who knows what's going to happen now, but my question was based on the last business administrator's report.
Did Michelle send over an explanation to you, Andrew?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry then. That was a manual input error. So there was an extra zero. So, as we go through the year, sometimes the salaries will go up and down according to where we are in the pay period and current staffing levels. But that was an error. So we are not overspent by that amount on staffing.
Well, that's a relief. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. And I do have that explanation. I'll forward it to you, Andrew, and then you can share it with the committee.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other member input or new business this evening? Just one point of reference, if I may add before we conclude tonight, right? I know at our last committee meeting, we talked about, a summary that I will put together and share with the committee. Just in terms of an update, I will be prepared to do that. Likely I'll wait till Tuesday. I know that's relatively short notice for the committee to review it, but I want to make sure we have the latest and greatest information coming out of the select board meeting on Monday before we do our evaluations. And I think it just makes sense and it's prudent of us to wait and to see what actions come out of that meeting before I share that with this committee. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, good. Okay. So plan on that email coming across to you on Tuesday. We'll meet again on Thursday next week. Again, please feel free to be virtual. I will certainly continue to be virtual next week as well. And because it's a voting meeting, we agreed to start at 7 and we will end up concluding by 9:30, if not earlier than that next week. And the idea is in terms of budget review and what we're going to start voting on. I know last week we talked about just looking at the budget lines kind of collectively. So we'll start with, I'm just looking at my list here, town meeting, then town clerk, and tax collection instead of the individual rows within these budgets. And then that's certainly discussion or debate stems from that type of motion or reduction, then we can entertain that discussion at that point. Is that still the strategy that makes sense for the committee?
Yes, please. If you could just send an updated list of which accounts we plan to review, that'd be great. Obviously, I'll review them all, but if I can have my notes sorted appropriately, that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think literally we're going to get through as much as we can next week, sensitive to our 9:30 stop. And I'm literally just going to take it from the top according to the schedule that's in the agenda. So starting with town meeting through debt service and then parks and rec through general government. And then tonight we covered health department through personnel administration. That's going to be my goal.
Okay.
Is Troy still there or did they take off?
They are gone.
Okay.
You see the smoke?
Yeah, I'm curious if we never heard anything back from Parks and Rec.
True. You know what that means.
Well, Troy will certainly be part of our meeting next week. And before any motions, we can certainly discuss anything that comes up. Okay. Anything else before we move into public input and closure tonight? All right, Mr. Burnell, has anyone joined us from the public?
I do not see any public members.
Thank you, sir. With that, I will close public input and we'll move into tonight's adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
Made
by Mrs. Douglas. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Harrison. We'll do a roll call vote, please. I'll start because I see myself first on the WebEx. I am an aye. Ms. Harrison?
Aye.
Ms. Forty?
Aye.
Mr. Sun?
Aye.
Ms. Douglas?
Aye.
I'm sorry, you made the motion, right? Sorry. Mr. Hodgkins?
Aye.
Mr. Leary?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
And Mr. Hayes?
Is he here? He
I
must
think he's muted.
He was here, then he dropped. I don't know if he's reconnected or not. I see a phone number. I'm not sure if that's Mr. Hayes.
I believe that is him.
But I think he's muted.
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. So I believe that passes 9-0-0, if I counted everyone correctly. And with that, we are adjourned. We'll pick up next Thursday, October 22nd at a 7 p.m. start. Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.